I have the ticket stub in my hand right now. Bus 1147 El Paso to Lubbock, departing 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday in October. Scheduled stops: Van Horn, Pecos, Fort Stockton, Midland, Big Spring, Lubbock. I'm looking at that stub while I write this, and I need you to understand something before I go any further. 3 of those stops never happened, and I can't prove the 7 people sitting around me were real. I've been trying to write this down for 4 months. I kept deleting it. I told myself I was tired that night, that desert routes do something to your head, that the dark out there past the glass is a different kind of dark than most people ever sit inside. I told myself a lot of things. Then, last week, I called the Greyhound customer service line, gave them the booking reference on my stub, and listened to the woman on the other end tell me that bus 1147 on that date had no other passengers listed. 1 ticket sold, mine, so I'm writing it down now. I'd been in El Paso for a job interview that went badly. Software position, 3rd round. They told me in person, and I had to sit with it for 2 hours before my bus departed. I wasn't in a talking mood. I bought a gas station sandwich from the Shell on Paisano and sat in the Greyhound terminal on South Santa Fe with my bag between my feet, watching the board. The terminal was the way those terminals always are at 2 in the morning, half the lights doing something wrong. Plastic chairs bolted in rows, a vending machine humming at a frequency that lives behind your back teeth. My bus was called at 2:09. I was the first one through the door. The driver was already in his seat when I boarded. I remember him clearly. Medium build, maybe 60. Gray at the temples, dark green Greyhound jacket zipped to the collar despite the heat. He didn't look at me when I handed over my ticket. He just said back half and tore the stub and gave it back. His voice was level, not tired. Level. The kind of level that's practiced. I went to the back half. I took the 3rd row from the rear, window seat on the left, because that's what I always do on night buses. You want your back to something and your face toward the aisle so you can see. I put my bag in the overhead, sat down, and looked out the window at the lit-up parking lot and the dark desert past it. Over the next several minutes, 7 other passengers boarded. I watched them come down the aisle because I had nothing else to do. First, a woman in her 50s with a floral rolling suitcase, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She took a seat near the front. Then an older man in a canvas work jacket, no bag that I could see, who sat across the aisle from her. Then a young couple, maybe mid-20s, who sat together in the middle section without speaking to each other. Then 2 college-age kids in matching gray hoodies who sat behind the couple, one of them with earbuds already in. Then last, a man about my age who walked the full length of the bus without looking at anyone and sat directly behind me. 8 passengers total, including me, a Greyhound bus that seats 47. The driver closed the door at 2:14, exactly on time. I remember checking my phone. He pulled out of the terminal without an announcement. No safety spiel, no route confirmation. Some drivers skip it on night runs. I didn't think much of it. We headed east on I-10 and the city lights fell away fast. By 2:30, we were in the dark between El Paso and Van Horn, which is one of the emptier stretches of interstate in the continental United States. Nothing out there. Grassland and creosote and the occasional cattle guard. The sky so big it stops looking like sky. I watched it for a while. Then I put my head back and closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I never actually sleep on buses, but I went into that half state where time moves differently, where you're aware of the engine noise and the road seam and not much else. I was in that state when I noticed the bus wasn't slowing down. Van Horn is 122 miles from El Paso. At highway speed, that's roughly an hour and 15 minutes. I opened my eyes and checked my phone. 3:31 a.m. The screen showed no signal, which wasn't unusual out there, but when I looked out the window, I recognized the terrain. I've driven this route by car. The Van Horn water tower is visible from I-10 on a clear night. Lit white, a marker I always look for. We passed it without slowing. I sat up straighter, looked forward. The driver's silhouette was the same as before, both hands on the wheel, head straight. I thought maybe Van Horn was a flag stop on this run, meaning nobody had flagged it, meaning no one was waiting and the scheduled stop was discretionary. I told myself that. Pecos is another 65 miles past Van Horn. We should have been there by 4:30 at the latest. I checked my phone at 4:47, and we were still moving. Signal still out. I looked out the window and tried to orient myself by landmarks. But the desert at that hour gives you almost nothing. Flat dark in every direction. The white dashes on the road, the sky starting to make the first colorless suggestion of not being night anymore, but only just. We passed the Pecos exit without slowing. I kept telling myself things. Flag stop, express run, schedule change not printed on my ticket. I'm a person who finds explanations. It's what I do. I've been doing it my whole life. There is always an explanation, and the explanation is always boring. Then the man behind me said quietly, "He's not stopping." I turned around. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, his face forward. He said it the way you'd say it's raining or the light changed. Flat observation, no alarm in it. Van Horn and Pecos, I said. He skipped them. The man nodded once. I looked at the other passengers. Nobody had moved. The woman with the floral suitcase was leaning against the window, still. The couple in the middle sat the same way they'd been sitting since El Paso, the same exact angle. The college kids with the hoodies hadn't shifted position in the 2+ hours since we'd boarded, and one of them still had his earbuds in, and I noticed now that the cord was not connected to a phone. It hung loose between his chest and the seat. I turned back to the man behind me. "Have they moved?" I asked. I meant the others. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been trying to remember if they got on." I felt something move through my chest. Not panic. The opposite of panic. Everything going very still and very precise. "I watched them board," I said. "I was sitting here." "Yeah," he said. "Me too." Fort Stockton should have come up by 5:15. Fort Stockton is a real stop, scheduled, listed on the Greyhound route board in the El Paso terminal. I had watched the attendant behind the counter answer a phone call about it before I boarded. Someone calling ahead to confirm a pickup. We passed Fort Stockton at 5:22 without slowing, and I watched the lights of the town trail off into the dark behind us, and then there was nothing again. I got up. I don't know why I decided to get up. I had no plan. I walked forward up the aisle, past the college kids, past the couple, and as I passed them, I looked directly at the woman with the floral suitcase, and I said, loud enough to wake someone sleeping, "Excuse me, do you know what stop we're on?" She didn't move. Her head was against the window, her eyes closed. Her chest was doing the thing chests do when someone is breathing. I watched it for a count of 3. It moved. But her face, even in sleep, had something wrong with it. Sleep makes faces loose. Her face was set, like a person doing an impression of sleep. I kept walking. I stopped at the driver. "You missed Van Horn," I said. "You missed Pecos and Fort Stockton." He didn't look away from the road. His hands stayed on the wheel, 10 and 2, and his eyes stayed on the interstate, and he said, "Seat. I have a ticket for a scheduled route. You've skipped 3 stops. Seat. I need to understand what is happening." He said nothing after that, not another word. His hands on the wheel, his eyes on the road, and after about 15 seconds of standing there, I felt something in the air next to him. Not a sound, not a temperature change, more like a pressure the way the air feels in an airplane before the engines change pitch. It got into my sinuses. It made the inside of my ears feel wrong. I went back to my seat. The man behind me said, "What did he say, seat?" I said. There was a pause, then, "Are you scared?" I thought about it honestly. "I'm something," I said. "I don't think it's scared." He made a sound that might have been a short laugh, not unkind. And then he said, in a different voice, quieter, the way you'd say something you'd been holding for a while, "I don't remember getting on. I remember the terminal. I remember sitting down. But I don't remember the in-between part." I didn't say anything, because I was thinking about my own boarding. The stub in my pocket. The driver saying back half. and then me walking down the aisle. And now that I was reaching for it, really reaching, the aisle had been dark when I walked it. All the seats had been empty. I had been the first one on, but I had watched them board after me, hadn't I? The sky went from black to gray to a thin, cold blue. The desert came back into visibility, the low brush and the red-brown flats and the occasional pump jack standing against the horizon like a bird bowing its head. We were somewhere in the Permian Basin, somewhere between the 3 stops the driver had skipped and the 2 that remained. The man behind me fell silent. I turned around once, maybe 20 minutes after our last exchange, and his eyes were closed. I don't know if he was asleep. His face was set the same way the woman's face was set. That's when I stopped looking at the other passengers. At 7:02, the bus slowed. I felt it through the seat, through the soles of my feet. The engine changed its sound. Through the window, I could see the outskirts of Midland, the first real city we'd seen since we left. Truck stops and storage facilities, and then fast food, and then a Days Inn, and then the low skyline. The bus pulled into the Greyhound station on North Lamesa Road at 7:11 a.m. The driver opened the door, he said, for the first and only time since El Paso, Midland. I grabbed my bag and I got off the bus. I stood on the sidewalk outside the terminal and I watched the door. I counted. I waited 2 minutes, 3. Nobody else got off. The driver pulled the door shut. The bus pulled out of the station. I went inside. There was a woman behind the counter, young, gray vest, not fully awake yet. I asked her how many passengers had been on bus 1147 from El Paso. She said she didn't have that information at this counter. I'd need to call customer service. I asked her if she'd seen anyone else get off the bus that just pulled in. She said she hadn't been watching. I called customer service from a bench inside the terminal. They put me on hold for 11 minutes. When someone picked up, I gave my booking reference number. She put me on hold again. When she came back, she said, "Mr. Calloway, I'm showing 1 ticket sold for that departure. Just yours." "There were 7 other people on that bus," I said. "I'm only showing 1 ticket, sir." I didn't push it. I don't know why. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in that terminal for 2 hours before I booked a new ticket to Lubbock on a different bus, a daytime run, full of people who moved and shifted and got up to use the bathroom. I watched all of them. I watched them constantly. It helped. I have thought about this every day for 4 months. I've looked up bus 1147. The route exists. It runs 3 times weekly. I found no accident reports, no complaints, no news items about a Greyhound driver skipping stops in West Texas. I found one thing on a Greyhound travel forum I don't want to name here, posted 8 months before my trip. A user described riding an overnight bus from El Paso that passed through Fort Stockton without stopping. They said the driver didn't speak. They said the other passengers didn't seem right. They deleted the post 3 days after writing it. I found it in an archive. Their username was a string of numbers. I've tried to find the man who sat behind me. I don't know his name. I don't know where he was going. I didn't see him get off in Midland, but I wasn't watching the door the whole time. I want to believe he got off. I want to believe he walked into that terminal and bought a coffee and called someone and told them what happened, and they told him he was tired and he agreed. I want to believe the 7 passengers were real people who had reasons for sitting the way they sat and looking the way they looked, and that somewhere there is a boring explanation I just couldn't see. But I have the stub, 1 ticket sold. And when I close my eyes on the drive home from work at night, I can still feel the pressure in the air beside the driver's seat. Not a sound, not a temperature, just pressure. The bus is still running that route, 3 times a week out of El Paso, 2:14 a.m. I checked the Greyhound site last Tuesday. Seats available, the page said. All 47 of them.